I'm starting with the gesture phase, painting the bottle, and I drew it with pastel pencil, and now I'm adding a little bit of value, some dark paint. I'm going to be painting this with cool and warm blacks. Okay, and the first thing, step one we'll do in painting glass, I'm going to start with misalignment and distortion of objects and shapes that pass behind the glass. Here you can see that with the table, where the table meets the wall, you can see a misalignment. And that is actually starting in that early phase. Now the next phase will be the block in phase, and I like to start with the background. Bring that up to the edge of the object. In this phase, eventually I'll be painting muted values in the bottle. So I'm just beginning in, just blocking in. Okay, and I'm changing from a cool background to a warmer background as light passes past the bottle. Okay, just bring it up to the edge. Step 2 is going to be muted values of objects and shapes that pass behind or into the object, the glass object. And so the values will be slightly darker and muted, not as intense as outside the glass. And I'm refining my edges. As I go, I try to soften edges all the time. Keep it just a little bit soft. The shadow is going to be a little bit harder as it gets closer to the glass object that's casting the shadow. Okay, this is the early refinement phase. Now I'm beginning to deepen my values, deepen my darks, and I'll have multiple values on the edge of the glass itself. So one of the things that happens on the edge of glass. Sometimes there could be even a reflection right on the edge of the glass. Now I'm going to be getting just a little slightly different value right on the edge here. Okay, you can see right here I'm just changing those values, getting a little bit of reflected light also on the edge. I've got a little bit showing on the other side of the bottle. Putting in a little more reflected light right in through here. And as I do that, I'd like to refine my edges, continue to refine edges as you go. And I'll continue to deepen my darks and adjust my lights as I go, and the whole time I'll be adjusting the edge as well. Okay, I'm beginning to change the value slightly on that edge right there, so it has a little bit of light and dark. It depends on the background, if it's light in the background or dark in the background. If it's light, I'll have a darker edge. If it's dark, I'll have a lighter edge. Okay, refine it, deepening my darks, and allowing for different values inside there. In the more refinement phase, this is the last phase before the final phase. Here I'll be adjusting the surface value. Step 4, I'll be adding glare, what I call glare, from light sources outside. Now I'm working on the surface of the glass, and I'm adding glare, slight strokes of glare. A lot of times I just drag the brush over it, just lightly let the paint just fall onto the surface, so you can see beyond it slightly, and it gives the effect of something on the surface. And I'm just slightly softening those. I'm entering the final phase. Here's where I'll put the highlights in. I'll have hard and soft highlights that often merge into some of the glare sometimes. I'll put it in slightly larger than it'll actually be. This is tricky. The highlight is tricky. It gets easier as you go. with practice you can get very good at the highlight. With the highlight, the object begins to jump out, takes on more 3D form. Now I'll flare the highlight out and keep one edge hard, especially on the very skinny highlights that are on edges of the bottle. One of the more difficult areas of the bottle is exactly the top of the bottle, where you work on ellipses, and it's just a tight surface, so that can take a while to finesse. You can see here, after you flare it out, you might need to come in with a darker color, whatever color bottle you're working with. In this case, I'm working with warm and cool blacks, so I tend to use a little bit of, if it's warm, it's going to look a little more on the brown side. Cool, it's going to look on the blue side. Okay, I'm flaring these out gently, and then I'm also touching it off this with the dark on the edge, just kind of kissing it a little bit. It's tight. Now I'm bringing the background in and just tightening up that edge, because the background's just a little bit soft still. This is oil paint. Now I'm flaring out the larger highlight on the edge of the box. This is a highlight that's going to flare out in most directions, so I would consider this more of a soft highlight. But it's always good to have a few hard highlights so that the viewer knows this is a hard object. Okay, you can see I push into it and then I pull it out into the bottle. Push in and out into the bottle. Okay, and then I'll soften that edge in a minute. These are tricky, you have to take your time. I like to have my white not be too hard, otherwise it's hard to pull into the bottle without getting a hard edge, a funny edge on it. Okay, you can see it's changing value now on the edge of the highlight slightly, and I will darken around that in a minute. Okay. Right now I'm beginning to darken a little bit around that ring, so it creates a bit of a soft glare edge all around. Now in some cases on glass, this one does not have a lot of objects passing behind it other than just the corner of the table where it meets the wall, or the edge of the table, not the corner, the edge of the table. So the rest of this object has quite a bit of surface glare, changes of values. Now I'm putting on the what I call secondary highlights. Not as important as the previous highlights, but still helps to create the illusion of depth and form and light. Okay, just like before, you're gonna leave when you put that highlight in. You're not gonna go over the top of it. Just pull parts of it. Now I'm adding the background. I'm just tweaking the background. I'm in the final phase. I'm just going to tweak some of these edges, clean up a couple edges just a tiny bit, add a little more light, try to get a little more contrast with the bottle.